This video was made possible through the support of my patrons.
Our battle cry will be total extermination!
They are to be exterminated.
Exterminate, annihilate, destroy! Daleks conquer and destroy!
Exterminate them.
The Daleks shall sweep away Gallifrey!
Do not deviate.
Exterminate!
Exterminate!
Exterminate! The Daleks must survive! Exterminate! Exterminate! Exterminate!
It's hard to overstate just how huge a shift Doctor Who had undergone by the end of its fourth season. William Hartnell had left, prompting a full-on recasting and regeneration of the show's leading man. Gerry Davis was making headway as the new script editor for the show and moving it more towards sci-fi and away from historicals. We'd got a brand new opening title sequence, and by the time we got to the ending of the last serial, The Faceless Ones, which saw the departure of Ben and Polly, there were only two more on-screen elements left from the Hartnell era to appear in the follow-up serial: the TARDIS and the Daleks, and by the end of the serial, even the Daleks would no longer be a part of Doctor Who. At least that was the intention. The Daleks were the first threat the Second Doctor, played by Patrick Troughton, encountered upon regenerating several serials ago, so it seemed fitting that this season would end with a final confrontation. But let's look back slightly further. Before Power of the Daleks, the last time audience members saw the Daleks was in Season 3's The Daleks Master Plan, which also had a prequel story called Mission to the Unknown. Both of these stories included elements from the Space Security Service, with Terry Nation wanting to use this organisation as a jumping off point to make a brand new Dalek-centric spin-off show which he could sell to America. When this never happened, Terry Nation tried to sell the same script to the BBC, who declined, and in protest, Terry said he wouldn't write any more Dalek stories. With this stalemate, showrunner Innes Lloyd commissioned Power of the Daleks writer David Whittaker, who had written many Dalek comic strips as well as co-wrote The Curse of the Daleks stage play from 1965, to write a 7-part serial which would see the final end of the Daleks. But before we get to the story proper, this serial was amongst most of the 1960s era of the show to be junked by the BBC, with Part 2 only surviving in the collection of Gordon Hendry, presumably an overseas version, or possibly from the 1968 repeat at the end of Season 5. As a result, for this video, I'm reviewing the 2021 animated recreation from BBC Studios. So Evil of the Daleks picks up right where the Faceless Ones left off, with the TARDIS being taken on the back of a truck in the 1960s to parts unknown, with the Second Doctor and Jamie giving chase. Their investigations lead them to antiques dealer Edward Waterfield, who has been conducting time travel experiments with Theodore Maxtable in the 1860s, which has allowed the Daleks to invade their house. The Daleks wanted to lure the Doctor and his companion there to assist in conducting a series of experiments to help discover the human factor, with Edward working under duress as his daughter Victoria is being held prisoner in the Maxtable mansion. The Doctor and the Daleks monitor Jamie's rescue mission of Victoria, but how far will the Doctor go to assist the Daleks? And do the Daleks have anything else up their sleeves for humanity? I think the best way to approach this story is to talk about the opening episode and then branch out from there. You see, because this is following on from the cliffhanger for the Faceless Ones and somehow has to wind up in the 1860s, so there's a lot of setup. Let's break down the sequence of events. You see, Edward Waterfield and Theodore Maxtable were experimenting with time travel and static electricity, which is how the Daleks got involved. The Daleks want the Doctor to help them, so hold Edward's daughter Victoria hostage to force him to lure the Doctor into a trap. So Edward sets up an antique shop in 1960s London where he's able to bring genuine artifacts from the past and sell them to private collectors. This is never brought up again after Part 2, so presumably this was just a side hustle or something, which is strange considering he wouldn't be able to use the currency that he's earning in the 1960s in a different century. He uses these connections to kidnap the TARDIS, but in a way that would ensure the Doctor ignores one of the false leads and takes the genuine one, which leads him to an abandoned warehouse. There, the Doctor needs to find a matchbook which will take him to a cafe. In this cafe, one of Edward's associates will tell the Doctor to come to the antique shop at 10 PM. The Doctor and Jamie make the appointment, but Waterfield's not there, and Jamie has to then be tricked into opening up a box which contains a gaseous sedative, so the Doctor and Jamie will be rendered unconscious, and then they can be taken to 1860 to take part in the experiments.
Everybody got that?
And not only that, but it turns out that the Daleks' plan to use the human factor was actually a ruse to figure out what the Dalek factor was. So the Daleks then take the Doctor to Skaro to try and imbue him with the Dalek factor, under instructions to use his TARDIS to spread the Dalek factor throughout Earth's history. And now my brain is oozing out of my ears. So, why couldn't Waterfield just lure the Doctor immediately to his antique shop, and why didn't the Daleks just bring him straight to Skaro? This feels like David Whittaker doing everything in his power to extend a solid 4-part story into 7 parts, and bafflingly enough, there's an assortment of subplots and other characters who seem to only exist to provide conflict and pad out the runtime. When Jamie wakes up in the 1860s, he's kidnapped by a man named Toby and taken to the stables, only to be immediately released. It turns out he was hired by Arthur, Maxtable's soon-to-be son-in-law, because he's apparently under Dalek control and then tries to kill Jamie in a sword fight, even though the Daleks still need Jamie for their experiments. Oh, and apparently Maxtable has the ability to hypnotize people, which I guess is plot relevant, because he did hypnotize Victoria, which resulted in her being kidnapped in the first place, and then the Doctor towards the end to lure him into the doorway. But the Daleks are able to order the entire cast about because they have family and friends as leverage, so why do you even need the hypnotism? Those last 2 examples, the sword fighting and the hypnotism, it almost feels like this era of the show's last gasp of trying to represent the historical stories of its past and its more abstract concepts before moving forward into outright sci-fi under script editor Jerry Davis. And while it feels out of place and extraneous in those examples, I do have to admit that the main setting for Evil of the Daleks is a really unique and inspired one, at least as far as Dalek stories go. We don't spend much of this serial in a metal city or an alien jungle, but rather we're in Maxtable's Victorian mansion, with the production team utilising Grimdyke's hotel, which almost gives it a fairy tale-like quality, from the Doctor and Jamie waking up in this lavish house, almost like they've warped into a fairy tale, along with Victoria Waterfield, played by Deborah Watling, acting as the princess in the castle that Jamie has to rescue. It's this setting which allows the Daleks, characterised brilliantly by David Whittaker, to shine and clash in this grab bag of genre tropes.
You have not eaten. You will eat. That is an order. Answer.
Yes.
You will not feed the flying pests outside.
Yeah, the story structure is an unequivocal mess with non-sequitur scenes and divergent plot points with no adequate resolution one after the other, but when it comes to the actual characterization and the dialogue, Evil of the Daleks absolutely excels, even in the small details, with Edward Waterfield forgetting what 1960s currency is compared to his native 1860 in conversation.
I pay you the sum of 50 guineas per week, do I not?
Pounds, actually, sir. £50.
Yes.
Edward Waterfield and Theodore Maxtable basically reflect two halves of the same coin. Both are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their goals, with Edward wanting his daughter rescued and Theodore wanting the Daleks to give him the secret of turning metal into gold. Waterfield is flawed, but he never loses sight of the morality at play, with the pair's underhanded behaviour, and whenever his actions inadvertently result in the death of someone else, it really affects him. Just look at his reaction when the Dalek leaves him with a body to dispose of at the beginning of part 2.
No, wait! Wait! What am I to do with the body? I can't go on with this.
Maxtable, on the other hand, these deaths don't seem to affect him at all. He's just out for himself and his own greed.
Is your daughter they have kidnapped? One moment you beg me to do everything I can to rescue her, next moment you blame me.
Yes, I don't mean it like that. It's the price. First Kennedy, now this fellow. How many people must die so that my daughter can live?
We are not the murderers.
No, just the silent partners.
At one point, Waterfield starts having second thoughts and the Doctor just tears into him.
You can't. You mustn't do it.
What do you mean?
You must stop the experiment.
Oh, you should have thought of that some time ago.
I know.
It's no use having a conscience now.
But before it's too late.
It was too late when they took away your daughter. It was too late when you stole my TARDIS and lured me to this house in this century.
Waterfield responds by trying to sneakily grab a metal bar to attack the Doctor with, but the Doctor just disarms him and talks him down. It's a wonderful moment, and it shows Troughton's ability to be angry and spiteful, but also be capable of great empathy, all in the span of a single scene. Towards the end, once the action moves to the Dalek city on Skaro, the Daleks show that they're able to turn metal into gold, and they use this to lure Maxtable through a doorway, which gives him the Dalek factor. The Maxtable everyone knew has gone. But before Edward can escape, he goes back to try and rescue him before the city's destruction, ultimately pushing the Doctor out of the way of a Dalek laser and taking the blast himself. A noble end for a man who was just trying to rescue his daughter and found himself in a situation that spiraled out of his control. While the whole cast is incredible, I do think that John Bailey as Waterfield and Marius Goring as Maxtable are giving the best performances of the serial, hands down. Do you want to know who else are giving incredible performances? Roy Skelton and Peter Hawkins as the Daleks.
Our plan has worked. We shall triumph. You will obey? You will obey?
Obey? What do you want?
Obey the Daleks. You are in our power.
Discontinue work. Why? Who spoke? Who questioned the Dalek command?
A lot of this comes down to David Whittaker's writing, but I love how, even through the performances, the Daleks have absolutely no chill in this story. They're erratic, impatient, and not to mention, physically violent. They're so entertaining here. My favourite moment is when, in part 6, once the experiments are all over, they decide to destroy Maxtable's house on the way back to Skaro, and when Maxtable follows them, he tears into the Black Dalek for destroying his life's work, and the Daleks have no idea why he's getting so worked up. It's brilliant.
Everything I possess is in that house. Everything. What right did you or anyone to destroy it? All these years of labor, all these years of research, destroyed through this caprice of yours.
They're characterized very differently from Power of the Daleks, mainly because the power dynamic is completely different, but they're still deliriously captivating to watch, which makes their fallibilities here even more disappointing. We've already gone through how incredibly complex their plan is. It hurts my brain, so I won't repeat it, but it seems so strange for the Daleks to bring on board their greatest enemy and just leave him with all of their equipment and kit unattended and unsupervised. That iconic scene in Part 5 and Part 6, when the Doctor gives the new Daleks the human factor and they become friends, there's no other Daleks present in that scene. Why are they letting the Doctor run amok with 3 Daleks? Also, when they bring the Doctor to Skaro, they try to give him the human factor, but it doesn't work on him because he's not human. But the Doctor is their greatest enemy. He's changed appearance and has an alien time machine. How can they not know he's not human?
But why him? Why not me?
Request denied.
Why?
You have traveled too much through time. You are more than human.
Wait, so the Daleks do know that the Doctor's not human. Then why don't they know the limitations of their own factor and their own technology? Wait a second, but when setting up a meeting with the Doctor in Part 1 with his assistant, Waterfield says,
The Doctor is notoriously unpunctual. I fear you may have a long and tedious wait.
I shall find him, sir.
The Daleks have such a vague understanding of the Doctor's identity, but they know about his tardiness? The Doctor, pretending to be under Dalek control, tells the Emperor Dalek to have all of the Daleks in the Skaro city pass through the archway door as a way to weed out the ones with the human factor. The Emperor, not knowing the Doctor has swapped over the factors in the doorway so the Daleks instead become imbued with the human factor, the Emperor just goes along with this plan. It means we've got this incredibly iconic and grand huge prop representing the top of the Dalek hierarchy, but he's also incredibly easy to trick. Not to mention, all he really does is just boom orders to the other Daleks. No wonder this guy got destroyed at the first sign of resistance. It's an incredible prop, but that's kind of all it is. But let me back up. Let's go through the events that caused this final end for the Daleks. So the Daleks trapped Victoria and got Edward to lure the Doctor in to oversee an experiment to monitor Jamie's rescue attempt. For whatever reason, the Doctor can't tell Jamie about this experiment and has to prompt him to go and rescue Victoria on his own. So he manipulates Jamie, with Edward even dropping in Victoria's location in conversation.
Aye, the truth you told Arthur Terrell may be that your daughter was in Paris.
I had to tell him that.
So you've got another story to tell me.
I tell you that the Daleks are holding my daughter prisoner in the south wing of this house, Mr. McCrimmon.
Then why don't you try and get her back, eh? What are you doing?
Well, what can I do? Be fair, Jamie. Waterfield's tied hand and foot because of his daughter, and we're tied hand and foot because of the TARDIS.
Aye, and that's all you can think about, isn't it? The TARDIS. Well, you can all stand around doing nothing. I'm sick to death of it.
This rescue, though, narratively, is probably where the story gets bogged down the most. It spans across 3 parts, when it really should have only needed 1, especially since a lot of the mission just revolves around waiting by Victoria's bedroom for the Daleks to disappear. It's on this mission that Jamie encounters Kemal, a mute Turkish wrestler played by Sonny Caudenez, who is told by Maxtable that an evil person is going to try and kidnap Victoria, so he needs to defend her. He's one of the main obstacles of this mission, and oh boy, along with this and the next story, The Tomb of the Cybermen, I'm not sure what this era's obsession was with taking quiet but strong people of colour who are manipulated by the villains, but it's not a good look, and it really ages the story. I'm also aware that there's some people who are watching this review and didn't listen to the last few sentences because they're still recovering from the whiplash of this Dalek story containing a scene where Jamie has to fight a Turkish wrestler. That's just where we are now. Now, Kemal is mainly there in a practical sense to be a non-Dalek obstacle, and also an opponent for Jamie to show mercy with after winning the fight, thus imbuing the Dalek Factor experiment with a positive human trait such as compassion. This is communicated in these cutaway scenes, with the Doctor, since Patrick Troughton was on holiday for the main filming block of these episodes, explaining what's going on and what's being learned here.
It took courage to fight Maxtable's Turkish wrestler.
The Daleks are afraid of nothing and no one.
But Jamie saved the Turk's life.
Human weakness.
If he hadn't, he would have died in that room of yours. If you want the human factor, a part of it must include mercy.
This is an interesting way to make the subtext the text, and while Jamie and Kemmel are able to escape with Victoria, their actions over the course of the mission don't end up being reflected in the Daleks imbued with the human factor, except for Jamie disobeying the Doctor and Waterfield, which gets reflected in the human Daleks not obeying the Black Daleks on Skaro without question, I guess. We have the legendary scene of the 3 newly awakened childish Daleks, named Alpha, Beta, and Omega by the Doctor, playing trains, and it's brilliant, and also, in some ways, really, really creepy.
Oh, this is Jamie. He's a friend.
Friend. Hello, friend.
Well, say hello, Jamie. Hello.
But how are the Daleks' games reflected in Jamie's rescue mission? The Daleks here have a sense of humour, but there's nothing like that in Jamie's actions. In fact, Jamie is the exact opposite. He's incredibly stoic and humourless in his rescue pursuit. He even threatens to leave the Doctor at the end of Part 5 because of how he's been manipulated and how these events have affected him.
Anyone would think this was a little game.
No, it is not a game.
Of course it isn't, Doctor. People have died. The Daleks are all over the place, fit to murder the lot of us. And all you can say is you've had a good night's work.
Jamie.
No, Doctor. Look, I'm telling you this. You and me, we're finished. You're just too callous for me. Anything goes by the board. Anything at all.
That's just not true, Jamie. I've never held that the end justifies the means.
Oh, words. What do I care about words? You don't give that much for a living soul except yourself.
What I'm saying is that Jamie's actions that gave these Daleks the human factor aren't reflected in the Daleks that now have the human factor. Unless, I don't know, does Jamie secretly want the Doctor to play trains and ride him? Oh, no, don't answer that question.
They're playing roundabouts. Oh, I'm getting dizzy. Oh, dear. Oh, I'm dizzy. Oh, I'm dizzy.
Dizzy, Doctor.
But it almost doesn't matter, because it turns out that the human factor was a red herring, so the Daleks could somehow learn from it and figure out what the Dalek factor was. It's so vague, and honestly, it just feels like a last-minute conflict to extend the story by an extra episode and to have more action in the Dalek City. Couple this with everything revolving around Terrell, Ruth, Toby, Molly, and even Kemmel to an extent, and Evil of the Daleks has a lot of fluff that you've got to wade through in order to find the thematically rich characterization. I think whenever the story cuts away from the Daleks, Maxtable or Waterfield, it just becomes less engaging to watch, and by Part 4, I was really starting to struggle with it. I've hardly even talked about new companion Victoria, because, well, she hardly has anything to do, other than be rescued and be really sad because she's in prison, and Deborah Watling plays the role really well, but it's still a really limited role. The Doctor brings Victoria on board at the end because everyone else she knows has either left or died. Evil of the Daleks essentially orphans Victoria, and she doesn't really get much screen time for it to sink in. However, I will be fair, The Tomb of the Cybermen, the next story, does address this, but in this story proper, well, even the writing draws attention to just how little she does and how little she contributes.
Don't worry, Kemmel. I shall protect you. I shall see they do you no harm. Yes, I suppose it was a bit silly.
And that's a point Kemmel's fate at the end. He's just pushed off a cliff by Maxtable when Maxtable has the Dalek factor. But Kemmel is like a super strong wrestler, and Maxtable, he's a big guy and he's imbued with a lot of rage, but I think he's a bit schlubby and out of shape. Like, how does he overpower Kemmel? This comes across to me as David Whittaker realizing, oh god, I've got one more character left to kill. Okay, Maxtable kills him. Parts 6 and 7, where the group are taken to Skaro, just feels like the story biding for time for the final end conflict, which, to be fair, is brilliantly executed. It's an epic confrontation, where the Daleks imbued with the human factor battle against the loyal Black Daleks in the Emperor's throne room, with the Emperor being damaged in the ensuing conflict. It does feel appropriate. 4 seasons and nearly 4 years ago, the Doctor and his friends landed on Skaro and explored the Dalek City, and here and now in the Dalek City, with the Emperor as the big bad boss, this is where the Daleks are wiped out.
I think we've seen the end of the Daleks forever. But final end.
For the original broadcast version, some film strips of the final end still survive, and there's some great use of model shots. There's some clever use of the limited Dalek props where these three are just going around in a circle to make it look like there's hundreds of them. And the pyrotechnics are just going off. And for the 2021 recreation, the battle is brilliantly animated. I particularly love the close-ups of the frantic Emperor trying to regain control, or at the very least, get the combatants out of the room.
Do not fight in here! Do not fight in
In the televised version, the battle ends with the Emperor presumably clinging onto life with a light still flashing within the casing. This was a last-minute decision, with Innes Lloyd ringing up the studio and telling Timothy Coombe, the production assistant tasked with directing the climactic battle, to not kill off the Daleks under the orders of Sidney Newman, and to improvise something. So they just found a single bulb in a storeroom, and they used that to give them an out in the story should the Daleks ever be needed again. In comparison, the animated version is a bit of a downgrade. It just copies the ending from Power of the Daleks, with a surviving Dalek coming back to life to bring the serial to the ending credits. But let's talk about that animation. At 7 parts, it's an incredibly ambitious animation project, and I think that BBC Studios did a brilliant job at bringing this story back to life. I love the different environments and how the lighting affects each character. The 3D Daleks are brilliantly expressive. There's a lot of director Derek Martinez's original camera work replicated, like the safe door opening at the end of part 1, along with some more modern camera techniques unique to this recreation, like the establishing shot of Max de Bour's house and the revolving camera while the Doctor is playing trains with the Daleks. I do think, however, that animation on this scale is just a bit limiting when it comes to the characters' expressions, especially when we can compare Patrick Troughton's performance in the surviving Part 2 with the animated recreation. It's just night and day. Patrick Troughton was an incredibly expressive Doctor, and these animations, they try, but it's really hard to recapture that. I've also got a few nitpicks, like the 4:3 black and white version's cropping, which sometimes just removes characters from shots. Apart from that though, I have very few complaints. The extended 18-month animation period absolutely paid off here. It's also noble to give all 7 parts such a dedicated treatment, especially considering just how much fluff this story contains, and that's really what bogs down the evil of the Daleks at the end of the day. From its incredibly sluggish start, its laborious rescue mission's second act, and a pretty padded and thematically anticlimactic ending makes it a slog to watch as a full serial. I think buried deep within this lengthy story is a brilliant 100-minute movie-style edit. Apparently, the evil of the Daleks script was presided over by numerous editors, and it shows because there's so much going on, and I think it undercuts what could have been a brilliant story about the best and the worst of humanity, reflected through Waterfield and Maxtable, along with Jamie producing a multifaceted human factor, which contrasts with the single-minded, ruthless Daleks and their factor. It's a thematically rich story with great location work, brilliant Dalek action and strong performances, but it feels so padded and laborious to watch, with questionable actions from almost everyone involved at some point in the story. It's a shame that the Daleks were able to manipulate and control a human colony so easily in Power of the Daleks, but here they're run circles around by the Doctor. It's not a bad story, it's just disappointingly muddled, and did, to its credit, result in the final end of the Daleks. For at least a few years, with them taking a near 5-year hiatus from TV screens. Sidney Newman's decision to try and save the Daleks at the 11th hour was one of the last decisions he made as the head of drama at the BBC, before leaving the position at the end of 1967, meaning that the evil of the Daleks wasn't over, just dormant. But join us next time as we go to the start of a new season of the show, with Season 5 taking the Second Doctor, Jamie, and new companion Victoria to the ice tombs of Telos, where they discover an old enemy hibernating in the Tomb of the Cybermen. I'll see you next time. Hey folks, thanks so much for watching my review of Doctor Who, The Evil of the Daleks. This is a re-review, an updated one, because of my original Dalekcember 2019 version being made before the recent animated recreation. If you enjoyed this review and want to see more like it, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more Doctor Who goodness, and also hit that like button, because it really helps out. And in case you're wondering why the angle's a bit different, why the background seems to be a bit odd, that's because I did a making of video to tide people over while this was making its way through the Content ID system. I was showcasing my new desk, different angles, so hi, different angle just for this review. But this review would not have been possible without my patrons, whose names you should be seeing on screen right now, but I'd like to give a particular shout out to these patrons: Anne Neubauer, Andrew, James Raby, Dean Jones, Andrew Blewett, Callum Baird, Daniel Davis, Dylan Whitaker, Flarbu, Flipmeister MK, Hunter Graham, Jeremy K. Duncan, John Campbell Rees, Leela, Mario Fanboy 15, Matthew Perry, Michael Serrano, Miranda Logan, Nate Harris, Palex, Raven Woods, The Brit Sniper, Toby Loxton, Lily Hu, Dan Morrison, Nathaniel Holden, Samuel Brooks, Zarby555, Aaron Carver, Adam Grattan, Darius, Evil Dalek 79, Finley Rude, George is Lost, Ginger Animator, Harvey Smith, Jack D. Evans, James Ivory, Joseph Adams, Joshua McDonough, Ollie Tomlinson, Rebecca Hill, Reese Lloyd, Ricky Temple, Ryan Duncan, Samuel Whitaker, The Raggedy Jedi, Will Be Fat, and Zach Conway. When reading out that list, that was the very first time I've ever had to go on Patreon and go to a second page. The amount of support you folks have been giving to my Patreon, the amount of you who are here, it means the world to me. It means that these reviews are possible. It allows me to do what I love and to talk about Doctor Who with all of you lot. Those patrons also got access to a Mr. TARDIS Discord server, where we host a bi-weekly Doctor Who Classic Club, where we make our way through classic stories. They get these reviews early and all other perks, so please check out the links in the description below. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you folks next time.